Now that we've had a little bit of time now to process Pochettino's departure from this football club, the main question now is, have we made the right decision in allowing Pochettino to leave? Today, my friends, we have more stories to discuss, more thoughts, more opinions. So I hope you guys enjoy today's video. Hit that like button as always, and don't forget to press the bell notification button, because you know throughout this next week stories and reports will get crazier and crazier. So hope you guys do that, and getting straight in this video. Now, the moment this departure was announced, my first thought was, how are the players now set to take this news? Now, we're getting some early developments surrounding the current state of the squad, and a lot of them are a bit disappointed and a bit surprised by the announcement that came out tonight. It makes quite a lot of sense when you deep it. We've seen Cole Palmer, Cucurella, and a few of the players show some public support towards Pochettino and thanking him for their time under him. And now you'd imagine that a lot of these players now go into the summer window and pre-season a little bit more skeptical now, because whatever roles that they were defining under Pochettino will mean nothing under the new management. You look at a Cole Palmer who, you know, this guy had full license and freedom to play under Pochettino. Will he get that same license and freedom under a new manager? He left a Man City where you play with more discipline, and let's be serious, at times this season we lacked any discipline whatsoever, but during that chaos it was definitely a period where a lot of the players had that opportunity to shine through, show their talents, and show their confidence on the field, show that personality. I think that's one thing the players will definitely respect and remember Pochettino for. It won't just be for all the times that he defended them. You look at Nico Jackson, where through large parts of the season he was being ridiculed by the media, by his own fans, but Pochettino was very public in his support for him. And in the end, look at how Nico Jackson has turned things around in 2024. That's the signs of a great manager, because sometimes management isn't just only tactics and what you're doing on that side of the field, but it's also how you manage your players. It's also how you look after them, how you get the best out of their game. And one thing Pochettino can leave here saying is that, yes, I got the very best out of a lot of these players. You're looking at Gusto, Jackson, Cole Palmer. Look how Caicedo now has stepped up even more. So many examples of players who were starting to finally flourish after having some difficult starts during the season. So yeah, you'd imagine a lot of the players are going to be a bit upset, knowing the fact that, one, they wanted to continue working under Poch. They liked the football they were playing under Pochettino, and some will feel like there was more to show next season once key players got fitter, once players returned back from injury. And of course, they can show their improvements they made from the first season into the next season. So it's definitely going to be a big loss in that aspect. I wonder how they'll feel about their futures. And also, I'm thinking about the other players whose futures aren't even defined right now. I guess for Ian Maatsen, actually, you know what, let me keep things real. Irrespective of a new manager, as we already know, the directors have full control in terms of how this squad is set to be constructed. So you'd imagine that a lot more players will be saying goodbye. Tonight, reports are suggesting that we are open now to selling Amari Hutchinson already to get that profit on him. Ian Maatsen is definitely leaving to Borussia Dortmund. So I guess in that aspect, you know, their futures aren't going to be changed because a new manager comes in and decides, yes, I want to work with you and work with you. Absolutely not. We know that your Gallaghers, your Jalabers, and many of them are still leaving irrespective of anything, right? So yeah, let's see how the players cope. But I guess it's back to the drawing board again for next season. And I guess it now goes into my main point, which is my second one. Can we trust our sporting directors? Because I think what's kind of sensational for me is that Pochettino is leaving based on strategic differences. But let's now go back in time to last year in the summer, when I thought Pochettino was hired for the fact that he works with the boards. He was hired for the fact that he's great at getting the best out of young players. A lot of the things behind why Pochettino was hired, you could argue that he has definitely demonstrated and shown this season. But I guess the big flaw, massive flaw in which both parties just couldn't continue working together was these strategic differences. And we're now getting more context behind what they are. And that's the fact that we feel like, you know, We want to have different direction now. We want to be a team under a new manager that focuses on playing high possession football, attacking football, that can of course like control games a lot better. And when you actually understand and then think about all the players we've now bought over the past like 24 months, a lot of their profiles are kind of like short. They're all very good on the ball. They like playing ball to feet, nimble, technical, etc, etc. And to be honest, they do suit more of a possession style of game, right? But then it poses the question, why was Pochettino then hired when he does the complete opposite? Now you could argue that Poch tried to do that possession style football which we saw at the start of the season, and it was quite poor. We weren't able to create chances. We weren't able to get the best out of the players. We had no threat. We weren't breaking teams down properly, and we were actually quite easy to counter-attack during the opening stages of that season. Was that Pochettino going against what he's known for, going against his managerial beliefs of being a intense, powerful type of team that likes to press the opposition in their half, that plays to create chances? That's his system, and you could argue that it did work because we scored 103 goals this season, which is one of our highest scoring seasons in God knows how long. Of course, that came without a lot of discipline, but Poch could argue, and I think he's been making this point throughout the season, sometimes the intangibles can stop you from being the team you're trying to become. I had injuries. I couldn't work on key ideas I was hoping to because I lost players when I needed them. I'm inheriting a squad overnight where most of these guys came in this season as strangers, not really having many strong relationships. To build that can only come with time. That's not going to be something that works overnight. This team at their current stage isn't actually able to play this type of football. I'm doing my best, but it's not working. I need to go back to what's true to myself and to this team. And I think that's when we started to see the signs of a more like offensive team, which kind of disregarded defensive qualities. But I think Pochettino did this thinking this is the best that this team in their current stage of development can produce at this point in time. You know, otherwise you hire a manager that is tailor-made towards playing this specific possession style football, which we've clearly been building this team towards, right? If that's the case, that clearly doesn't work in my favor. If players like Gallagher leave, if Jalad leave, and players are key to my current way of playing are going, essentially, how can I expand upon these ideas for next season? I can't do that. So I think this is why both parties amicably decided it's time to move on and part ways. But there's going to be massive question marks now on the directors, because essentially now that we're knowing that you're fully in control of everything, right? Managers will never have a say. It's all down to your decisions. Did you make the right one to begin with by hiring a manager that really had no long-term future here? Do you think Pochettino, after all his possession struggles with Paris Saint-Germain, was going to come here and make things better with a more inexperienced team? It doesn't really make any sense. And I think ultimately, Poch realized that in the long run, he'd be the loser here. Nothing would work out in his favor. He wasn't going to get support. There'd be no continuation of any ideas whatsoever. I guess it's time to leave. So now I'm really looking at every decision these directors make. They can't flop with the new manager now. If we want to be this type of possession, tiki-taka, whatever type of team, you need to make sure you're hiring him right now, and you have to give him that time, because when he comes here, don't fool yourself into thinking yet again there'll be instantaneous improvements and an instantaneous understanding of ideas, because essentially we're going back to the drawing board again. There's going to be different coaching requirements. There's going to be different uses of the players. Are we going to see Cole Palmer and others get the same level of freedom they've showed this season? Absolutely not. Everything goes back to the drawing board, and with that comes patience, which you need to have now. And I do feel like if they mess up again, I'd be surprised if either one of them survives staying in their position in the long run, because it's not making any sense now. It just doesn't add up. Why are you hiring the manager that doesn't even suit your long-term ambitions and ideas? I can see how a future manager may have some difficulties, because it's quite clear that we're already going through constructing the squad in advance, where we're going to be selling a lot of players. What if another manager was like, I actually like the idea of using Ian Maatsen, who's been absolutely phenomenal for Dortmund, phenomenal in the Champions League. He's in a Champions League final, and he's the type of fullback that I need. We're going to dismiss that to then hire someone else for him, even though we have a player who is potentially tailor-made for this hypothetical replacement I'm talking about. But they're the type of ideas I'm trying to discuss now. You know, it doesn't add up now. I feel like at some point there has to be like a respectable level of balance between a manager's demands and the ambitions of the football club. And I know it's a delicate balance. I'm not asking for 50-50. Honestly, I think 25% in favour of the manager and 75% in favour of the club. And I say this because as fans, we've seen it ourselves. I mean, how many times have managers taken over positions here? They're inheriting discards left by, you know, other failed managers or failed tactics ideas. They're inheriting these players that ideally they don't want. And that really affects how they can work on their philosophies, their ideas, because they have to constantly incorporate a player that they didn't have any use for. And we saw how that accumulated over seasons and seasons. And I think this is where it created this issue where we lost that competitiveness. We can't make that mistake again. And I can understand that, listen, if back then under Roman and Marina, we had more of a consistency from the board in terms of transfers, where we weren't just solely buying players depending on what Roman Abramovich wants or what certain managers wanted, there'd be better continuity over time, right? But equally, I think we're doing the opposite extreme now, where it's solely focusing towards building this impressive, technical, talented young squad without any real proper direction behind who's supposed to steer them. I think that's the dilemma we're currently in right now. And I think that if a manager could at least keep like 2-3 players core to his ideas and then you support them, or, you know, you have the other players integrated around that, I think that could be the best of both worlds. That could be the balance that I think needs to be found at some point in time. Because, you know, I look at most successful teams and I haven't seen an example yet of a club solely deciding who a manager has to work with. You look at Xabi Alonso, for example. He was working alongside Rolfs, you know, over the past 2 seasons in constructing this current unbeaten Leverkusen squad. He wanted to get Boniface. He wanted Grimaldo. There were certain players that he wanted, which he got. And there were certain players that Leverkusen wanted that he got. And there were certain decisions that they came to together. That's the best example right now. I've even seen it with Pep. I've seen it with Klopp. I feel like there has to be that little balance at the moment, because I feel like we're going into these untested territories, and it's a bit worrying a little bit, because we haven't seen any real strong signs of evidence that this new approach to this football club, this new direction we're under, is set to become a successful one. So I guess it falls down to my final conclusion. Was the club right when it comes to releasing Pochettino? And it might sound like I'm being, you know, all over the place, but maybe it is the right decision. If all this money we're investing, we got the wrong person to steer the direction the owners and directors are hoping we're going to be steered in. If we're going to be signing these players, then maybe we need to get more of a shorter passing, possession control type of game, which I think a lot of us, you know, in our hearts, even before Pochettino announcements, kind of always thought, okay, maybe with the players we have now, this is the direction that makes sense. But I don't think it's as easy to master. And I think that still requires a lot of patience and time, and hopefully some fortune, because I imagine the new manager has to inherit another injury hit squad, because the medical team has its difficulties, because we have new medical team staff, etc, etc. What I'm saying is that under this ownership and the rebuilds, we've seen how a lot of the rebuild can be undermined, because again, too much has happened all at once. There's nothing gradual, it's all instant. It's I don't know, it's a little bit worrying, you know what I mean? But equally, what was the long-term future with both Pochettino and the club? Unless the club decided, listen, Poch, you know what? We've seen that there is something to your football and your ways of being. Maybe we're going to reduce our ambitions. We don't think that this young team is ready yet to compete for a title. Like, honestly, do any of you guys see us getting 90 points plus anytime soon? And that's what you need, bare minimum, just to even challenge Man City. Just to even compete against them, you need 90 points plus. We're at least 2 years from that, maybe 3 when we introduce, your Kendry Pyers and Esteval Williams in their first years. Ideally, when you are competing for a title, Kendry's going to be 21, Esteval Williams is going to be like 21, and they were the same ages that players like Rodrigo and Vinicius Jr. were at before Madrid started competing again. Time will tell, but let's not pretend that Pochettino wasn't at fault for things. If anything, I'd say it was his whole strategy, which was the main issue, in the sense that I've always said this, at the start of the season, we had to be a team that was just playing for chances, scoring goals, just so we can get W's, so we can keep the confidence of the players up, so the players can at least start to develop some understandings in the final third together, which you need. That stuff only comes with time. And I felt like the approach of being this perfect team that can dominate possession, that can keep clean sheets, that can score 3-4 goals a game, it was just too ambitious, it was too much. But maybe with this new context now that Pochettino is leaving, did he feel like he had to produce that because that was why he was hired? And that was how he'd keep his long-term position here. I'll let you guys decide that. As time went on, some of my opinions around Poch did change. Again, at the start of the season, I was sympathetic, but then I was getting a bit tired. Levi Cole, left back, Ben, left wing, all this overcoaching. And I think these are things that Pochettino addressed himself in recent press conferences this month, where I think he was kind of admitting to the mistakes he made of putting too much on the team, where it was more about just letting them play their football and fine-tuning things over time. I think with the fine-tuning, we finally saw this evidence in our final 6 games of the season. And I guess it was that hopeful note which made you realize, okay, maybe with another preseason and players coming back to fitness, it did seem like Poch had that potential to at least guarantee us Champions League football for next season. We can't pretend that there weren't some negatives though. I think for me, the biggest negative of this season, I have to say, it was that disappointing Carabao Cup final defeat to Liverpool. Personally, I think some of the most embarrassing final defeats I've seen. The whole approach was awful. To get outplayed by Liverpool reserves, Liverpool's B team, who barely had any Prem minutes that season, to play like losers. I was just worried about, is this what you're coaching this team to be? That was a rocky spell, and honestly, I can see why that could have been the defining period where a lot of confidence was lost towards Pochettino, because I think if Poch could go in a time machine and go back to that point, there's no way he approaches that game like how he did. But also, it seems like maybe there was some miscommunication, and ultimately, this is why I think we saw a lot of small signs of evidence that there was this incompatibility between the manager and the ownership, because I remember a report that came out maybe 2 months back which suggested that Pochettino thought that he would definitely get more time, hence why maybe we approach games in a certain way we did, where Poch from a coaching point of view might be thinking, listen, it's not even about the results now, it's simply about how they perform and play together, how they show their personality, how they show their talent on the field. If you guys remember, there was this discussion at one point where maybe he could still keep his job irrespective of whether we miss out on European football. Then it became about him getting European football, and then we started seeing a different approach behind how Poch was managing the team. He's now got European football, and ultimately it meant nothing at all because he's still going. I don't know. Now that I'm recording this video, I'm having so many different thoughts and opinions. I feel like I'm recontextualizing a lot of the management that we saw from Pochettino. Yes, a lot of it wasn't pretty. A lot of it wasn't good. And I'm sure Poch himself will know if he could go back in time, he would change this, he would change that. He'd be controlling the games better for us in terms of his management decisions, the approaches, all that type of stuff. But then again, there's all these contradictions that's now flooding my mind about the miscommunication between what the ownership was expecting from him. And I think ultimately near the end, when it came out that, okay, European football is key, I guess it's a positive that we did see an uprise in form. And yes, 5 games against smaller type of teams. I'm sorry, during large parts of this season, we dropped nearly all our points against these types of teams, hence why we missed out on Champions League football. So we can't be ignoring a 5-game winning streak, which we haven't seen since Thomas Tuchel. So let's keep that real. But anyway, my friends, I feel like that's enough. I feel like I'd have even more thoughts about this. Sorry if things are maybe a bit confusing. I wasn't expecting to do anything like this today. I honestly thought I'd still be recovering, because, you know, it's not enjoyable being in pain with this stupid back thing I got at the moment. But yeah, you know, I'm gonna have to just like fight through, because there's too many important videos that'll be coming out over the next few days, and I hope you guys are gonna support and keep on watching on BlueLionsTV. So my friends, you share your thoughts and opinions on this. We'll have more discussions, and hopefully if I can sit down for long enough, I want to do the calling show, because some of you guys have to come on so we can talk about what the hell is going on at this football club, right? So my friends, thank you for watching. I'm Nini FC, this is BlueLionsTV. I will see you guys tomorrow, some more videos.